Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 3 p.m. ET, and you have found us here on a special edition of Crime Time, the 3 o'clock version, because we did not want to let Brendan Slocumb get away without telling us about his fabulous new Symphony of Secrets. So we made a special time just for him. He is busy, 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 constantly busy with this fabulous book, and we are so happy that he is here today, and I cannot wait to tell you all about the book. I am Hank Phillippi Ryan, your host, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense. The newest one is called The House Guest, which is sort of Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise, and it already is in a second printing, and I'm really, thank you, happy about that. And I just hit send on book 15, and it is accepted and it is in production. So I am thrilled about that. It's called One Wrong Word, and you'll be hearing way too much about that when the time comes, but not today. Today, we have the absolute joy of welcoming the fantastic Brendan Slocumb, whose second novel, Symphony of Secrets, is out right now. Really, you all, only Brendan could have written this. Only Brendan would have written this. And that is, that is really interesting. And it's just so personal and so important and so life-changing and so twisty and good. And so it'll make you enraged. And that is a good thing. Symphony of Secrets by Brendan Slocumb. I've got to tell you, the New York Times called Brendan the maestro of mystery. It doesn't get any better than that. But yet it did get better than that, because listen to this. The New York Times says, Slocumb is a composer and conductor whose skills translate well to his mystery writing. His mastery of pacing and tempo, and his natural sense of when to soothe the audience and when to jolt them out of their seats are on full display. The novel's examination of white supremacy as an extractive force is clear and present without tripping up the fast-paced and thrilling plotline. And that is the New York Times. So you open the paper or you open your email, Brendan, and you see that. What did you think about that?
Well, first, hey, Hank, thank you so much for having me on again. I absolutely adore you. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate everything, all of your support. Thank you. It is, I pinch myself every single day, and that review was phenomenal. I absolutely love this story, and I'm so glad that people are really gravitating towards it and they're enjoying it as well.
The maestro of mystery. What did you think? Did you get T-shirts that say that? You're going to send
Oh man, I'm trying to find a way that I can kind of corner the market on that particular. Yeah, that might be my new Instagram handle. I think that might be it.
Totally. So look at all the people who are here already today. Brendan Shannon Hansen says, I loved the violin conspiracy, and as we all did. Lynn Hanneman is here from Philadelphia, and Renee from Southeast Florida, and Sylvia is here, and Margaret Lang is here. She is keeping up on her cello, she says. So Anissa is here. She says, have met Brendan in person several times, and he is very entertaining. Writes pretty good books too, says Anissa.
Thank you.
Are here. We will talk to all of you as the time goes by. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, I should remind you that it was started about 3 years ago by the fantastic powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us reading and keep us talking and keep our community together, keep us learning about new books and discovering new books like the fabulous Symphony of Secrets by Brendan Slocumb. So, Brendan, I'm supposed to read your bio now. I'm going to read the bio now. All right, I will do it. I'll read the bio now. Here we go. Because you should know this. I want to talk about the book, but you should know about Brendan. Brendan Slocumb was born in Yuba City, California, and raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro with a degree in music education, concentrations on violin and viola. While at UNCG, Brendan was the concertmaster for the University Symphony Orchestra and principal violinist. He performed with the numerous small chamber ensembles and in the BESK string quartet. BESK or BESK? BESK?
Let's go BESK.
BESK. And what does that mean?
It was actually the first initial of the four members of the quartet.
Oh, I love it.
Made
okay.
a word. Yeah.
Best string quartet. That's great. And I keep trying to get him to come to Boston, be the concertmaster of the BSO, but he won't do it. As a musician, Brendan has performed on violin with the Washington Metropolitan Symphony, the McLean Symphony, the Prince George's Philharmonic, and the Alexandria Symphony. He also performs chamber music with members of the Annandale Symphony. He maintains a private music studio, teaching lessons to students on violin, guitar, and piano. And if you don't follow him on Instagram, please do, and Facebook, because he shows sessions with his students and is such a passionate and compassionate teacher. And you just see the joy in his students' eyes that must be amazing, Brendan, to hear and see when they get it, when they connect.
It is so much fun. I mean, that's the whole point. And it's an amazing feeling, taking one kid from where they are to the next level. It's just, that's what it's all about. And it's such a joy to be able to do.
I mean, I've seen in your students' faces a moment where they go, oh, that it's different there's a difference between playing the notes and sort of being the music.
Yes.
How do you do that with them? How do you connect?
Each kid is a lot different. They all have very distinct personalities, and it's never a one size fits all approach. So I'm very creative in how I take those kids from that one place to the next. And it really just depends. Like, I have a little violinist. Her name is Kate, and she started not being able to do anything, and now she actually knows. She considers herself a violinist. She's like, yes, I can play this. I can do this. I know how it works. I know how it should sound, and it is the best feeling in the world to be able to see her to do that.
That just makes me cry. That's a life-changing thing. That is a life-changing thing. My name is really Harriet, and my parents named me after the man who introduced my father, who was a music critic, named me after the man who introduced my father to the music of Mozart when he was 7. And that was the thing that and as a result, I'm named Harriet. Thanks a lot. I guess it's better than Amadeus. I don't know. Or Wolfgang, either one. But there is a thing about music that is a blossoming flower, if you let it be. And let me just tell you one more bio thing, because talk about blossoming flowers. After touring the Philippines with the Northern Virginia Chamber Ensemble and witnessing firsthand the conditions that many of the young music students and their families endure, Brendan founded the nonprofit Hands Across the Sea to offer support to the Berea School of the Arts in Manila in the Philippines by providing instruments, lessons, and monetary support. The organization also supplements school supplies and dental and medical assistance. So yay, and welcome, Brendan Slocumb, and welcome to all of you. Lucky students for sure, says Diane.
Oh,
that is marvelous. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So finally, I want to talk to you. I want to talk about legacy and appropriation and power and fame and money and racism and disappointment and persistence. All of those things are in this novel. So tell us a little bit about the book, and hold up your copy of the cover, because when you start reading the book, you will get why it looks like that sort of Matisse cutout, color blocked cover. So talk a little bit about the book.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned the color scheme on the book, because it was when I got it, it blew my mind totally. I was like, wow, you guys are geniuses. Symphony of Secrets takes place in the present and in 1920s New York City. And that was basically the age of jazz in America, and jazz being a truly American art form. I really wanted to focus on that. The world's greatest composer, Frederick Delaney, is living in New York City prior to his rise to fame, and he meets a young woman named Josephine Reed, who is living on the streets and sneaking into jazz clubs and, listening and playing all kinds of music. And in the present, Professor Bern Hendricks is tasked with authenticating an original, long-lost piece of music, Frederick Delaney's greatest piece of music. And with his sidekick, Ebony Washington, they discover that Delaney may not have written all of his music at all by himself. And back in the past, Delaney and Josephine have a relationship that will have ramifications throughout history.
And so I tell you all, I know you're all going right now to pick up this book, Symphony of Secrets. One of you will not have to do that. One of you will win it today. Leave a question, leave a comment, leave anything. Applause for Brendan, and you will be entered to win a copy of this book. Otherwise, go run, run, run. Not right now, but when this is over, run, 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 and get a copy of this book. So, did this book start with Frederick Delaney? Or did it start with Byrne? Or did it start with an idea about something else? Or did it start with reality?
It actually started with Delaney himself. I needed a character who I could relate to and who a lot of people could relate to, and that would be Frederick Delaney as a very young, optimistic, up and coming musician, as a composer. And he just materialized because this is what I envision when I see people just starting out. He's very, very optimistic. He's got so much promise and so much potential. Then things kind of happen. It's all about choices that we make, and Freddie's choices really define who he is. He starts off one way, and I think we can all relate to this. All of our choices define us, and who's to say that if you were in someone else's shoes, you wouldn't make the same choice? So I like to say that the road to hell is paved in good intentions is very, very, very apparent in this book.
And you show that so gorgeously, sort of the step by step. I mean, he's a good guy at the beginning. He's just trying to play music, and he's just not very good. He's enthusiastic, but he's just not very good. And then he meets Josephine.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about her in a minute, who sort of teaches him how the music is, how to connect with the music in the way that she does. Tell us a little bit, as much as you want to, about the character Josephine, because without her, there is no Frederick Delaney.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. Love the way you put that. Josephine is a very unique person, and her character, she lives with autism. We know now that she would be living with autism. Back in the 1920s, there was no formal diagnosis for autism. So we've come a long way in terms of characterizing neurodivergent conditions. And I wanted to write her character specifically with autism because I've not seen too many stories or movies with people living with autism who were portrayed positively. So I really wanted to focus on Josephine in that way. Not only is she living, she's a neurodivergent condition, autism, but she's also a Black and a woman living in the 1920s. So she's got like a triple whammy against her. And through it all, she maintains her love of music and nature. And she's able to just create this wonderful world around her, regardless of her situation.
We'll talk about connections. I mean, when you talk about someone who's neurodivergent, like Josephine is, in other ways, she's incredibly advanced. She's incredibly connected to every sound she hears in a way that most people cannot be. I mean, the sound of a door knock, or the footsteps, or the squeak of a wheel, it's music to her. It's music to her, which she can transcribe. How did you think about someone who thought about music in a different way, just not notes on a staff, but that there's a thing that's the music that she wants to hear, is sort of how she puts it. How that, as an author, that's a big concept.
I'm a musician myself, and one of my favorite composers is Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, and he had a condition called synesthesia. And Josephine has this condition as well. Basically, it's a sensory perception of it. It's a heightened sense. If you hear a note, in some cases you would see a color as well. If you hear an A, oh, that's green. If you hear a G sharp, oh, that's purple. And so Josephine has this as well, and it's overwhelming to her. So the way that she deals with this is to basically write everything down in a specific code she has. Like you mentioned, the doorknob turning, or putting a key in a lock, or a horn blowing, or kids running down the hallway. It's all music to her, and it would really be overload if she didn't if she were not able to process it by writing it all down. So she writes down the music that she wants to hear, which is phenomenal. And, I just thought that concept was tremendous. And I think it adds a great deal to the story. And I'm so proud of the character of Josephine.
Yeah. And you talk about the synesthesia and the seeing the music as colors. Now hold up that cover again. Now that you know that this is what the story is about. Now how do you think about it? And you see that symphony of color and how it can be a little bit discordant or a little bit beautiful depending on how you see it. And it's just great. It reminds me too of Shostakovich, who supposedly put codes in his music as well. I wrote a short story about that, as a matter of fact, about I'll tell you this, you all. It was an X-Files short story about how they figure out what Shostakovich's codes really meant and how they connect with the universe. So I hear you. I made it up, but I hear you about the universe and about the concept of it. So going back to, let's stay in the 1920s for a while. So Frederick and Josephine frequent not only the clubs of New York City at the time, but also the way music was written and sold, which is that musical commerce was so fascinating. Talk a little bit about that in the story and the research that you did for that.
It was really, really interesting to me. We think of selling music today. You hit a button, in an MP3 player, and you've got a song. Back then in the 20s, the technology was just getting to the point where a phonograph was being used, but publishers would print out sheet music, hand them to a musician or a song plugger, and they would go to a department store and literally play the music on a piano so that patrons could hear it and say, okay, I want to buy this song. And, they had to be pretty talented, and that was a lot of work. And this actually brought about the copyright laws that we have today, because composers would write music and they would literally be starving because the publisher would pay them $10 and they would make $10,000 off of the song, but you could barely eat because you wrote a song that everyone is listening to and you only got $10 for it. So I found that period in history really, really interesting, and it's very relevant even today. We just saw the case with Ed Sheeran and the family of Marvin Gaye, and I'm not saying anything, but if I were on that jury, I thought it sounded a lot like Marvin Gaye's piece. But I'm not on the jury, so that's just my opinion.
I listened to that over and over, and I thought, if I were a musician, I would know better whether this just was similar or whether there were progressions that were really exactly the same thing. But I hear you, and it's interesting because the commerce of sheet music and the idea that you had to have a song that was catchy and memorable, just like now that someone could walk down the street humming that song. That was the thing that made the song saleable. But there were constricts of is that a word, of what music would be played where and who could write music and who could sell music. And that's where the germ of the story begins to bloom. Talk a little bit, do germs bloom? Talk a little bit about those strictures of music and how Frederick Delaney and Josephine go and fit into that, and the music companies.
Yeah, with the publishing houses, there was very specific types of music that were being sold at the time that were popular. There were dance tunes and songs that you would hear in the jazz clubs, or just very hummable, singable tunes. And then you had what were called minstrel songs, or, to use some derogatory language for the time, for the 20s, coon songs that certain publishers absolutely would not sell because they were by Black musicians, Black composers. And the thought was, well, no one's going to want to buy that stuff because it was written by a Black person. So yeah, we're not going to sell that. But just the fact that, this was going on. This is how it was. Just because of the color of your skin, you could not sell a piece of music or be taken seriously as a composer. I found that really, really interesting, and a lot of people find it uncomfortable. And one reason I write things like this history-wise is so that people can understand. And the best way to heal is if you understand and acknowledge. So I do applaud people that power through it, even though it may be a bit uncomfortable, but it was a real thing. I'm so grateful that we have evolved and that's not how it is anymore. But I do think it's important to take note of the history.
And this is what happened. I mean, this is how the system worked at the time. And initially, we love Frederick Delaney because he takes Josephine to work at one of these publishing houses and convinces them that the idea that she's a Black person doesn't matter, that she can work just like anyone else. And we think, oh, that's great. And then it twists and turns and devolves into something completely else, which I'll let you talk about as much as you want to.
It definitely turns into something else, and it all goes back to choices. Freddie really, truly, in his heart, believes that he's helping Josephine and he's doing her a favor, and we see that in his progression, or his digression, however you want to put it. And Josephine, she really is being taken advantage of, but for the right reasons. Again, it all goes back to choices. And I think it's really important for people when they read this story to understand this is how it was. These are the options that people had, and it's all about the choices that we make. But I'm going to leave it right there because I don't want to give away too much. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it because I haven't read this book. It's been a little bit since I've read it. I'm looking forward to actually listening to the audio and getting a different perspective on it.
In the audio, is there music?
There is there is not in this audiobook, because every single piece of music, every title, every lyric is made up. I fictionalized everything. And it was, I went back and when I read it for the first time, I'm like, wow, I can actually hear this piece of music. I should write this down. But that's a lot of music, and I'm not the greatest composer in the world. So I'm pulling a Freddie Delaney, and I'm not going to write it down.
I did hear you, though, refer to Geppetto's Wood. You sneak that in. That's not made up.
I did. That's definitely, if people go to reverbnation.com/gotwood, GOTWUD, you can actually hear some pieces by my band Geppetto's Wood.
which is in the book as well. And I was trying to figure out from the beginning, I'm semi-familiar with that kind of jazz, of that kind of popular music of the time. And I thought, do I know that? They also possibly be real songs. But you did have to come up with some lyrics,
Yes.
And some titles, which were really of the time titles. I know this is so insidey, but how did you do that? Make them so authentic sounding?
Well, for the lyrics, I did all the lyrics, and I'm a songwriter for my band. So the bad lyrics they were totally easy to do because I have a plethora of terrible lyrics.
Yeah,
And
those are some bad lyrics.
some of them were awful, and some of the better lyrics, I don't want to say great, but the better ones, I take pride in being able to do that as well. But all of the song titles, all of the operas, the arias, the dance tunes, if you've ever seen the movie The Usual Suspects, which is a great movie, it's like 30 years old already. I Kaiser Sose'd everything.
You did. The name on your mug, and the name on the bus card, and the name.
I'm looking over here. I see a poster, and I see everything. I'm looking around my office. Everything came from it. If you've not seen the movie, watch it. It'll make perfect sense. Like Kaiser Sose'd it.
Totally get it. And it's really funny. That's what we all do as authors. I don't know. I have a friend who said that she was terrible at character names. So she said she actually named somebody Sharpie because Sharpie.
Hey, it works.
Totally so. So that's in the 20s. So this is all going on in the 20s. This sale of music, the rise of Frederick Delaney, his connection with Josephine. You all need to read this to find out. We're talking about Symphony of Secrets. Talk about the Secrets by Brendan Slocumb. Hold up the real cover too, so when they go to the bookstore, they can see the real one, not just the advanced copy. So look for that. So, but in the present time, there's Byrne and Ebony, and they have a task of, you say what?
Of authenticating the long lost greatest piece of music that is supposed to have ever been written by Frederick Delaney. And it is the score to his opera Red from his ring cycle, The Rings of Olympia. There's green, black, blue, yellow. Green, black, blue, yellow. Yes, those are the operas that came before Red's predecessor. Those are Red's predecessors, and these were fantastic operas. And Red was supposed to be the pinnacle. It's called Red, the opera, The Ring of Americas. North and South Americas, and it's supposed to be the greatest opera ever written, and it was lost. No one ever knew what happened to it. History, that's been one of history's biggest mysteries, and Byrne has been off. It's been found, and Byrne is tasked with authenticating it along with his sidekick Ebony Washington.
And tell us a little bit about Byrne.
Byrne is indebted to Frederick Delaney. He is basically, he's the biggest groupie, the biggest fanboy of Frederick Delaney ever. He knows everything about the man. He knows what kind of toothpaste he used. He knows what type of deodorant he used. Every piece of music he's ever composed, Byrne knows about it. He knows every pen stroke, every signature, everything about him. So he is the one. If anyone's going to authenticate this piece, he's the man to do it. And he is truly honored to be given this task by the Delaney Foundation.
And the Delaney Foundation is, really wealthy and really powerful and really white. And Frederick Delaney and Byrne comes to this organization with this wonderful task. I mean, imagine the job of maybe handling the papers of the person that the composer that you revere above all else. And maybe you're going to be the first person, I get goosebumps too, the first person to decide whether this is really true and the first person actually to hear it in that way. And then what happens, as much as you can tell us? I'm very terrified to tell the story without you telling me.
Yeah, well, hey, that's a good thing. So Byrne he goes about his task. He's hand authenticating the piece, and he decides he's going to need a little bit of help because he's got a deadline because the piece is to be performed. So he calls up his friend Ebony, who he's worked with in the past, who is, I've heard her described as everyone should have a friend like Ebony. You should all be able to channel your inner Ebony. And they discover that maybe Delaney didn't write all of his music at all. And should we tell the foundation? Maybe they know, maybe they don't know. And then it kind of goes, and you got to read it to see what happens.
Yes. And please do read Symphony of Secrets. It goes from being sort of, thank you, good job.
I'm learning. I learn from the best.
Okay. It goes from being a cool mystery into something. There's sort of three stories, I think. There's the story of Byrne and Josephine. That's sort of one level of the story. And then there's a bigger story about stolen music of the time. And then there's a even bigger story than that about enslavement and power and racism and white supremacy and all those kinds of things. It's really three things, and you can read the book on all three levels. We've talked a little bit about the plot of Byrne and Josephine and Frederick. Let's talk a little bit about the real stolen music, where that came from.
Unfortunately, things like that, people appropriating other people's music and giving them zero credit, it's theft. It still happens today. Hundreds and hundreds it's happened to hundreds and hundreds of people. There's a very fine line between borrowing and just flat out theft. Unfortunately, people feel like they are powerless. There a lot of songs that you hear on the radio today they are not the original artists that are playing these pieces of music, and the original artists are basically starving because they get zero credit and will never know their names for creating such amazing pieces of work. It happens in every genre of music. And one composer that comes to mind in particular for me is George Gershwin. Yes, Gershwin is a fantastic composer in his own right, but it's kind of funny that he goes to the clubs in Harlem where all the black musicians are, they're singing and playing this music. And then George Gershwin manages to write Porgy and Bess, America's most famous opera. So, it kind of, it has happened, and it continues to happen today. The case with Ed Sheeran and Marvin Gaye, I guess it just depends on who you ask. If it's borrowing or is it
I
theft?
mean, if it's influence, or if it's influence, is it learning? Is it growth? Maybe but it's hard to pin down. And you really do a marvelous job of just opening our eyes to the possibility, well, the reality of that in the book. There's a wonderful documentary on PBS about the influence of Jewish music on Broadway. Have you seen that? And how
I
when
have
you,
not. I'm
oh,
making a note right now.
it's amazing. And when you hear about, I mean, and briefly, part of it is about how Cole Porter couldn't get a hit. And then he started listening to Eastern European sort of Jewish music. And he came up with, Begin the Begin and all those minor chords. And it started sounding a little bit different. And when it won't be mind blowing for you. It'll be reassuring to you. But to me, I just sat and thought, I never thought about it that way. I know that music, but I never thought about it. I know on both ends, I know that music, but I never thought about it that way. So it's either good or bad, just sometimes it's bad, though. Sometimes it's bad. And then the bigger picture about when, okay, I'm going to be careful. When there's a possibility that someone in power is going to be unhappy with the possibility of that power and money being taken away, then it revs into absolute, high gear. I can't think of the music word, and is really scary. This book is really scary.
It's and it's so, I think it could happen. It could happen, and it has happened. And it's one of those things where, is it the actual corporation that is malevolent, or is it the people running the corporation? I would hate to condemn an entire group because of the actions of a few, and that's a fine line also that gets talked about in this story. And I think people can relate to that. We hear often about these mega corporations that are just doing these awful things, but is it really the corporation, or is it just a few people at the top? And that also gets explored.
Nevertheless, either way that it goes, in Symphony of Secrets, Byrne and Ebony are at the apex of it, and their lives are going to be changed by the powerful people at the top, no matter what their actual motives are. I mean, people want money, they want power, they want to be famous, and they learn how to use it to keep the little people down. I mean, that's just and that's what this book is about. Everybody is here today saying hi. Mark Cecil is here. Cecil is here saying,
Mark.
Brendan, my man. Mark says, I must say this man is not only a great writer, he has a great publisher. I think there's probably a backstory there.
A little bit.
Mark have the same publisher, lucky man. Okay.
Yeah, good. Hey, Mark.
That's really great. And we have so many questions. I'll get to some. The colors in the cover, says Diane. And what is your favorite part of writing, says Vicki Gregory.
Ooh, my favorite part of writing has got to be just the element of telling a story. I like to be entertained, and I want people to be entertained by what it is that I'm writing. If one person says, wow, that elicited some type of response, that's a win for me. I just want people to be entertained.
Yeah, and that is completely what you did in Symphony of Secrets. It is absolutely entertaining. And the way you describe how to think about, I haven't marked to read, but I'm not going to. I want you to read, not you, but I want all of you readers to read. The way that music is not, the human brain has to write down music somehow in order for the next person far away from them to play it. There has to be a way, like words, to put it down. But then what if there was another way of putting it down? What if there was a way that was more descriptive of the music? Have you ever thought about that yourself before the book, of whether, that maybe notes aren't the only way? I mean, you talk about it. I have so many thoughts about this. Go ahead.
For me, I'm one of those people, I just try to absorb whatever it is that I'm being given. And it's so different for each person. Each person, you could be sitting right next to someone and have a completely different interpretation of how to transcribe it, or how to bring it across to someone else. So that's always been fascinating to me as well. I will sit with a musician, and we will have, we'll be playing the exact same thing, and we'll have two completely different ideas on how it's and that's the great thing about music. There's an infinite way to describe, and you'll get something different every single time from that you can listen to the same piece of music 100 times and get 100 different interpretations on how to describe it or how to play it. Or it's fascinating to me. That's one thing that I love about music so much. You can go anywhere, not speak a language, and have an instant connection with someone.
And also, I always think about the two Laylas, the Eric Clapton Laylas, the two ways of playing that. It's the same song, but just in a different way and written out a different way and comes across a different way. It's just so powerful. My dad did a radio show for the University of Chicago a million years ago in the 50s called How to Listen to Music. And I have the scripts that he wrote for it, but he did not put the specifics about what pieces of music he played to illustrate I thought, oh, I can put this together and make this work. But he didn't leave the specifics about which music he wanted to have people listen to. So he would describe it. And so I'm just going to send it to you, and you can figure it out for me, and we'll do the radio show. We'll do the radio show together. The other thing that's so critically interesting about Symphony of Secrets that I think we really need to discuss in some depth is pizza.
Oh. Yes, I agree 100%. There's nothing like New York City pizza. There's nothing like it. And it doesn't get any better. It just doesn't. You can go down any street in the city and get a slice of pizza, and it's gonna taste phenomenal. There'll be slight differences, and there's just so many options. And who wouldn't bond over pizza? And when I was eating pizza, oh, I miss it. When I was eating pizza, I don't think I ever had a bad slice in New York, and they're just all so different. And it's a great way to bond. And you can you can meet your new best friend at a pizza spot in New York City. And I just think it was a perfect way for Bern and Ebony to not only bond, but just show how much they cared about each other.
Yeah, I mean, they bond over pizza, they banter over pizza, they argue over pizza. Like, are we really going to talk about pineapple? And what about potato on pizza? Is that too Roman to put potato on pizza? I was starving by the time this book was published, and we're having pizza tonight as a result of this. Renee says, can you send some NYC pizza to me? I loved that theme. It was really realistic. We're running out of time, Rats. We're going to take a couple of questions. What were your favorite books that you read growing up, says Anissa?
Ooh, huge Agatha Christie fan. Murder on the Orient Express, first mystery I read cover to cover. Loved all of the Sherlock Holmes stories. Hound of the Baskervilles scared me senseless when I was a kid. But yeah, I was a huge mystery guy, and I love science fiction. And I've got a solid bookshelf full of science fiction books that I cannot even begin to name them. Probably why I'm not such a good science fiction writer.
But there was some fantastic science. I remember I remember reading Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Sometime in college, and was just so pivotal to me. So Shannon saying, I love pineapple on pizza. Oh, sister, we're going to have to talk.
Oh, it's good, Shannon. I'm with you.
We'll have to go out to get some, Brendan, because
definitely.
I'm not quite sure about that. I'm not quite sure about this pineapple. Renee is asking, this is a great question, Renee. Do you listen to music while you write? And if so, what and who?
I do not. I can't listen to music because I'm a musician, so I'm constantly analyzing. I need noise in the background. So either the news is on, or believe it or not, reruns of Three's Company is what I write to.
Why?
Because I've seen every episode of Three's Company, and I know what's coming, and the funny parts are still funny, and it's just comforting to me. So I like to be comforted when I'm writing. And yeah, and if I'm writing in my office, there's no TV in my office, I will put it on my phone. There's a channel that's 24/7 Three's Company, and I just have it on in the background. I know, it works.
That's so sad. It's a good thing there's nobody listening. But I was there. Do you know Sulari Gentle? She's an author from New Zealand. Okay. And she has the television on all the time when she's writing too. Something easy, she says. And she says that there's some sort of research that the frontal lobes of your brain need to be distracted for you to get to the real depths of your brain power. And that by having this sort of nothingy show on TV, your frontal lobes are distracted by that and focused on that. And that allows the big stuff to come from deeper inside. Isn't that?
I believe it. I totally believe it.
Works for her, and it seems to work for you. We are out
Come
of
and
time.
knock on our door.
Oh, please. He can sing as well. The books. Anissa says the book should come with a pizza coupon. That's a good idea. Anyway, we were talking about Symphony of Secrets by Brendan Slocumb. Hold up your book, Brendan, because that color is great. That color now, and you can almost hear, and it's almost a music staff. It's almost the music staff in that color as
and
well.
You'll notice which color is missing.
Yellow red is Mopes.
That is the name of the opera that was lost for 100 years.
The Other Ring Cycle, I guess, is what it is. So we will now draw for the winner. We'll spin the wheel of fun and draw for the winner of Symphony of Secrets. Brendan, we were trying, before you came, we were trying to figure out what music should go with this. And I thought, Brendan should pick the music for this. And the winner is Shannon Hansen. Yay, Miss Pineapple Pizza wins a copy of Symphony of Secrets. So Shanson, you know how to find me. I call her Shanson because on the very first chapter fun I ever did, she came. And I was so nervous and I was talking so fast. I know you're surprised about that. I was talking so fast that I conflated her name and called her Shanson, not Shannon Hansen. So that forevermore is her name. Anyway, you win Symphony of Secrets. That is marvelous. And you know how to contact me to get this. Brendan, you'll get the semi-last word. What would you like to say to your audience who came here today to hear about this?
Thank you so much for your continued support. Thank you. I want to continuously keep you guys entertained. My next book is going to be about, which I'm going to start writing next week, a cellist and witness protection. So there's definitely going to be a musical hint to everything that I do. And I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much for your support. Go have a slice of pizza.
I'm going to. Can I just ask you, do you have a title?
I do, but I'm not allowed to say it. I'll email it to you, Hank.
Okay. A cellist and witness protection. I have got to say, and I will say it right now, that is a genius idea. That is just because how can you hide talent? Either the person is going to play and he'll be discovered or not, and he'll be unhappy.
You are right there, Hank, right there.
Email me right now. All right, you all. Love you so much. Do not move, because in about 15 minutes, look who's going to be here. Liv Constantine, Val, and Lynn Constantine are coming. They're the sisters who write as Liv Constantine, the senator's wife. This is Washington, D.C., power and deception. Very chic, very sophisticated, very twisty. You know the Constantines, how they write, and they'll be here in 15 minutes. Next week, I am teaching at Thriller Fest, so I will not be here. So you all just miss me. Read a good book during our hour, okay? Read a good book, and then I'll see you the next week for MP Woodward and Hannah Mary McKinnon. Cannot go wrong with that. Until then, we will see you in 15 minutes. And remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we'll see you next time. Love you.